He has been described as one of the most underrated figures in Irish history.
But his small mountain clan would call other clans to his banner to stand shoulder to shoulder with the old English palesmen to inflict one of the greatest defeats of English forces in Ireland, and yet his own head would be sent to London to be presented to the Virgin Queen. This is the story of Wicklow's greatest Gaelic chieftain, that was Fiach Hugh O'Byrne, and it is Fiach, which means raven. Fiach was born in the early 1540s into the O'Byrne clan. These were a junior branch of the main clan. Their territory, known then as Raghnaill or Ranelagh, and centred at Ballinacor in Glenmalure, County Wicklow, loosely comprising of about 150,000 acres over the Wicklow Mountains, to the south of Dublin City. Over the centuries, this clan had defeated many of the government forces sent to quell them, including the military order of the Knights Hospitallers, who were defeated here in the 1270s. When his father, Hugh McShane O'Byrne, died in 1579, Fiach succeeded him, and it was Fiach's constant raids on the southern side of the Pale of Dublin that the English administration worried most about. Fiach lived in the Rath in the townland of Ballinacor. However, there has been much speculation as to where exactly this was, but two ring forts, marked on an 1840 Ordnance Survey map, overlook the ford of Greenan, and this was a perfect lookout for approaches to the Glenmalure Valley from the east. These raths would have been wooden in structure, surrounded by an earthen rampart. Sadly, there is little trace of them today.
He was placed in fosterage as a young boy with another O'Byrne family a few miles away. The custom of fosterage was hugely popular in ancient Ireland as a means of strengthening ties of kinship between clans.
The O'Byrne clan also had a poet or filly in residence at Ballinacor, and filly travelled from all over the country to spend time with the clan. One of the ring forts was thought to have been a place of hospitality for visiting poets. Filly were professional poets in ancient Ireland. Among their duties was to preserve the tales and genealogies of Gaelic nobles.
The O'Byrne clan was one of the few Leinster clans to have an existing collection of poems in its honour, and I leave a copy of one in the description below.
All this is important as under 30 years later, the old Gaelic order and traditions, as described, would end when Ireland's most powerful Gaelic chieftains would leave Ireland in 1607 for permanent exile to Europe in an event known as the Flight of the Earls. England's Tudor monarchs were determined to conquer and colonise Gaelic Ireland. At this time, they concentrated their efforts on the province of Leinster, which ran from the Midlands to the east coast of Ireland. These woodcut images of John Derrick's Image of Ireland from 1581 give an incredible insight and detail to Ireland at the time of Fiach, but was made in praise of the military campaigns of England's Sir Henry Sidney, as the English held all native Irish in contempt, especially the Kern or Woodkern.
So Kern was a Irish warrior. Military historians would class them as light infantrymen of the Middle Ages, normally armed with just a spear, small shield and a knife called a scian. They would have fought with hit-and-run tactics, a kind of forerunner to the guerrilla. One minute they're a fighter and the next they're a farmer.
As one historian put it, quote, the Irish Woodkern are seen as a diabolical force, a, quote, crooked generation, and a contemporary Englishman states that, quote, these monsters of the world, these pernicious members of Satan, these wretched wretches have no consideration, and concludes that the civility and the English reform mission are wasted on the Woodkern. For him, not even an upbringing at royal court could salvage a people addicted to sin, quote, as the sow returns to the mire and the dog to his vomit again.
It's also important to note that the Tudor King Henry VIII had broken from the Catholic Church, and now his daughter Elizabeth I carried on his mission by suppressing the Catholic faith, and the champion of Catholicism in Europe was Spain at the time, and in due course would send military aid here. All these factors spooked the government forces in Dublin.
The barbarity of the times and the wanton slaughter committed on the ordinary people is given in the following reports. Quote, we killed 2 of Fiach's foster brothers, 2 of their sisters, 4 or 5 kern, and as many others as were in 5 cabins. Another states, quote, Captain Hungerford and Lieutenant Parker rather chose, at the break of the day, they entered Glenmalure, and had the killing of divers, and what they were I know not. They brought away 5 swords, and 6 gallowglass axes. They slew many churls, women and children.
Killing of divers means diverse or various. A churl is basically a simple country person, and killers of women and children. Oh yes, Hungerford and Parker were real officers and gentlemen, all right.
After the massacre of Mullamast in 1578, where many of Leinster's Gaelic leaders were killed by the English, many turned to Fiach for leadership. After the summary hanging of clansman Tibbet O'Toole at Castle McKinnigan by Seneschal Harrington, Fiach attacked and burned the castle in late July 1580. The English authorities would have to do something about what they now called, quote, the firebrand of the Wicklow Mountains.
Matters came to a head with the summary execution of a considerable number of the clansmen in Leinster, the Art Boy MacMurras as they were known. Many of these were connections of Fiach, and on hearing of this savagery, he was determined on revenge. It was this extreme behaviour by the English, more than anything else, that propelled Fiach into outright rebellion.
Fiach also found himself in an unlikely partnership with a counter-Reformation Catholic, the Viscount of Baltinglass. Baltinglass had once defended the Pale from the likes of the O'Byrnes, but he had become disillusioned with the prejudice of the English Protestant government against its loyal Catholic subjects. News of the planned revolt had filtered back to the government in Dublin, with moves afoot, led by Archbishop Loftus to arrest him, and Baltinglass fled to Fiach and unleashed the rebellion.
Fiach and Baltinglass proved useful partners in rebellion, each bringing different qualities and assets beneficial to the rebellion's initial success.
This development scared the authorities in Dublin more than they had ever been by Fiach, prompting the new Lord Deputy, Arthur Lord Grey de Wilton, within days of his arrival in Ireland in August 1580, to embark on a mission to sort out this menace on the borders of the Pale once and for all. The army which landed with Grey seems to have been badly equipped. One officer bemoaned the condition of many firearms provided to the troops. Of 120 guns given to his command, scarcely 20 were serviceable.
So this is a replica of a flintlock musket. Its predecessor, as used in the 1580s, was the matchlock. Both operated on similar lines as the gunpowder. The ball and a wad had to be rammed down the barrel before priming the pan here.
The matchlock used a smouldering cord or match to ignite the priming powder that would ignite the main charge in the musket barrel.
The matchlock was also known as the arquebus, or simply shot. Writing in the 1580s, one expert, Humphrey Barwick, a musket with good powder, he said, could kill an unarmoured man at up to 600 paces, a man in common armour at 400 paces, a man in good quality pistol-proof armour at 200 paces.
Grey had decided to enter Glenmalure on the morning of the 25th of August, fiercely determined to crush the Queen's enemies. There was considerable apprehension among his veteran captains. They strenuously advised Grey against such direct approach. Sir Francis Cosby, captain of the hired cairn from Connacht, warned against descending into the valley. A clearly irritated Grey refused to listen. Cosby was one of the men behind the massacre at Mullamast 2 years earlier, where 400 men, women and children had been slaughtered.
And spoiler alert, Cosby wasn't going to make it.
The rebel forces, which silently moved into their prepared ambush positions during the morning of the 25th of August, were a confederation of malcontents, fiercely opposed to the government. They were composed of several large Gaelic war bands from south-east and western Leinster, parties of disaffected Catholic Palesmen, at least 2 arquebus companies of deserters from Crown forces.
In a letter written after Glenmalure, Grey confessed that he had expected rebel strength not to exceed 100 men, but in reality there was in all about 800 rebels, including 60 shot. The English army numbered between 2,000 and 3,000 men.
Glenmalure is a U-shaped glacial valley. It has steep sides, and at the time of the battle was heavily wooded. There was plenty of natural cover consisting of scrub, trees and boulders, and ferns would have been in full span. A small river, the Avonbeg, bisected the valley and made its floor quite marshy.
It was perfect ambush country. Fiach and his allies were fighting at home, giving them a distinct advantage.
Grey's plan was to enter the glen from the west and advance the infantry up the centre, with the cavalry covering their advance from the southern side. Grey would ride with the cavalry. The only problem was, Fiach knew he was coming. One historian suggests Fiach divided his force into four. First he scattered his allied cairn among the undergrowth along the steep slopes of the valley's northern side. Further down the valley, at Ballinafonshogue, he hid his main force amongst the trees.
Some historians speculate Fiach's main force probably consisted of Galloglass troops. These would have been classed as heavy infantry. They were well trained, well armed, fully armoured, and they were the elite of Irish fighting men.
On the northern side's cliffs, stretching from Ballingoneen to Cullentra Park to Lodarrig, he positioned the companies of Arquebus. A third force under Baltinglass's command was sighted further down the valley, dug in behind earthworks mixed with plashing.
So plashing is a type of impenetrable barrier made from hedging, for example, a living wall if you like. Baltinglass's force consisted of his own companies, some shot, and whatever cavalry the rebels possessed. Baltinglass was to cover the retreat if the ambush failed.
And finally, Fiach dispatched a fourth group to the valley's head with instructions to remain within view of the advancing English army. As the English began its descent into Glenmalure's forests, a heated argument erupted between officers, giving further testimony to the mood of fearful apprehension hanging over the ranks. As many soldiers were facing action for the first time, the sight of officers openly bickering did little for morale. Grey ignored his veteran captain's advice and sent a force, mostly of recruits, against Fiach's seasoned fighters. An officer called Sir William Stanley describes their descent into Glenmalure. Quote, "When we entered the foresaid glen, we were forced to slide sometimes 3 or 4 fathoms. It was in depth where we entered, at least a mile, full of stones, rocks and bogs and wood." As the vanguard proceeded deeper into the valley, there was some opposition. In the conflict's initial phase, the English had the better of the fighting. Stanley now writes, quote, "So long as our leaders kept the bottom, the odds of the skirmish was on our side." Sir William Stanley reported the vanguard's colonel gave the order to scale the valley's steep northern slopes to come to grips with the rebels' companies of shot. But Stanley's report is damning. Quote, "But our colonel, being a corpulent man not able to endure travail, led us up the hill that was a mile in height. It was so steep that we were forced to use our hands as well as to climb as our feet. The rebels were delivering murderous fire on the column from the cliffs above. One English officer commented upon the rebels' clever positioning of shot, quote, 'He having the English at an advantage upon every side of the hill, with great fury assaileth them with his shot, and in a very short time did kill the most part of the forward, both captains and soldiers.' The men of the vanguard must have been weakened by fatigue induced by their severe exertions. In contrast, Fiach's forces were fresh and motivated by the thought that failure meant death. The greatest advantage possessed by the rebels was surprise, something Grey lost early in the campaign.
The column continued to climb the valley slopes, and it seems the rebels attacked when a prearranged signal was given. The signal was perhaps the shrill notes of war pipes, as can be seen in the wood carvings. One historian even suggests that the Irish had a type of Scottish Highland charge, a rapid downhill charge to close the distance between the musket shot and the soldier trying to reload it after firing it. Whatever the tactic, suddenly from everywhere, the insurgents surfaced from cover. Waves of them crashed against the column, tearing holes in its massed ranks. The assault's suddenness and ferocity stunned the English recruits. one English cavalryman who saw the rebel attack from the relative safety of the high ground on the opposite side of the valley, wrote of the reaction of the Elizabethan soldiers.
The strangeness of the fight is such to the new-come ignorant men that at first brunt they stand all amazed, or rather give their backs to the enemy. Stanley describes the suddenness of the rebel attack more succinctly. Quote, "The enemy charged us very hotly." Cosby's hired kern at the column's head defected to the rebels. In a letter, an officer confirmed the defection of Cosby's kern, and in all probability Cosby was killed by them too. Quote, "The Irish kern and shot joined the rebels with arms out of Her Majesty's store." The main column was under attack from all sides when the colonel ordered a fighting retreat. William Stanley's rearguard company of shot covered the badly mauled vanguard's retreat. Sensing victory, Fiach sent word to Baltinglass to attack. All his remaining forces were now unleashed against the retreating English. The joint attack by Fiach and Baltinglass turned the English fighting retreat into a massacre. Casualties soared as the column broke up under the double impact of Fiach's forces. Faced by carnage all around them, the terrified English broke ranks and ran for their lives. Stanley graphically describes the bewildered plight of the English soldiers, quote, "Were a man so slightly hurt he was lost, because no man was able to help him up the hill. Other soldiers," he wrote, "just lay down and died, quote, being so out of breath that they were unable to go no further, being not hurt at all."
This was a time when the wearing of full armour was in decline. However, a young officer called Sir Peter Carew was foolhardy enough to enter Glenmalure wearing a full suit of armour. A witness tells how Sir Peter, exhausted from the efforts of running uphill in the armour, paused momentarily to rest and catch his breath. This delay proved fatal. A rebel party came upon the exhausted man and disarmed him. According to the witness, quote, "As soon as he was disarmed, with his sword, slaughtered and killed him."
3 years later, on a Dublin street on Midsummer's Eve, Sir Peter's brother George stabbed to death one Owen O'Nacy, who had apparently boasted of being young Carew's killer. It seems that Grey's horsemen prevented the utter annihilation of the companies covering the retreat flight. Having done all he could, Grey and his riders urged their horses up the mountainside and fled for their lives. The last word in the fighting should be left to Stanley. Quote, "It was the hottest piece of service for the time that ever I saw in any place."
As for the rest of Fiach's story, I will let it be told with the folk song called "Follow Me Up to Carlow." The lyrics were written by P.J. McCall in the late 1800s, but the air is reputed to have been played as a marching tune of Fiach's pipers. The composer is unknown, but the tune was collected by McCall, who heard it being played by musicians in County Wexford in the late 1800s. The song was largely in danger of being forgotten, but was revived and made popular by the Irish band Planxty in the 1970s. So until then, thank you for watching.
Lift a Mackay or og your face, brooding over the old disgrace that Black Fitzwilliam stormed your place and drove you to the fern. Grace and victory was sure, and soon the firebrand he'd secure, until he met at Glenmalure with Fiach MacHugh O'Byrnes. Curse and swear, Loch Kildare, Fiach will do what Fiach will dare. Now Fitzwilliam, have a care, fallen is your star low. Up with halbert, out with sword, on we'll go for by the Lord. Fiach MacHugh has given the word, follow me up to Carlow. See the swords of Glenmalure flashing over the English pale. See all the children of the Gael beneath O'Byrnes banners. Rooster of a fighting stock, would you let a Saxon cock crow out upon an Irish rock? Fly up and teach him manners. Curse and swear, Lord Kildare, Fiach will do what Fiach will dare. Now Fitzwilliam, have a care, fallen is your star low. Up with halbert, out with sword, on we go for by the Lord. Fiach MacHugh has given the word, follow me up to Carlow. From Sagart to Glenmalure, there flows a stream of Saxon gore. Och, great is a rory, O'Byrnes, and sending the loons to Hades. White is sick, grey is fled. Now for Black Fitzwilliam's head, we'll send it over the ribbon red. Queen Liza and the ladies. Curse and swear, Lord Kildare, Fiach will do what Fiach will dare. Now Fitzwilliam, have a care, fallen is your star law. Up with halbert, out with sword, on we'll go for by the Lord. Fiach McHugh has given the word, follow me up to Carlow.